My name's Dan Ferguson. I'm one of the partners of a company called Groove Jones out of Dallas, Texas. So I'll be helping out here. The next speaker is LaJune McMillian. Did I get that right? Thank you. She is from the Black Movement Library, and she is a multidisciplinary artist. It's very hard to say that in the morning. An educator creating art that integrates performance, extended reality, and physical computing to question our current forms of communication. Let's all give her a welcome as she comes up on stage. Also, if you have any questions at the end of our session, I'm going to ask you to come to the microphone in the middle so we can all hear that. Thank you.
Hello. I'm just going to start by just talking a bit about the Black Movement Library, and then I'll show some videos from a previous project and as well as some student work. My name is LaJune McMillian, and I'm a new media artist, and I've been working in this field now for about 8 years. And I started this work as a student at NYU Tandon School of Engineering in their integrated digital media program. And through that program, I learned a lot about motion capture technology, physical computing, virtual reality, and extended reality. But once I actually left school, my access to a lot of those various different tools and softwares was drastically limited. And so I began to really think about ways to create space for people to have access to those spaces. And that's really what inspired the Black Movement Library to start. In the past few years, access to motion capture data, 3D character-based models, and software to make animation yourself has skyrocketed. From Make Human to Mixamo to Carnegie Mellon's motion capture database, the ability to make and finish polished projects has become easier for many. And while these tools are really great to use, they lack diverse characters and movements. And so I began thinking that maybe I could create a library that had those tools that were accessible, but then I realized early on that representation within these various tools and technologies wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to just be represented in these spaces. I first had to really work with the communities that I am serving and also learn myself what it means to actually be seen in these spaces. And also, I really wanted to really understand how our movements and bodies are already represented in the media and in the tools that we use. And so I began doing a little bit of research on the history of blackface and how that sort of transitioned into digital blackface. And so how historically the commodification of Black bodies is sort of presented to us as this way to just like be in space, but not actually be able to be physically and present in a space. And so what really got me to thinking in this way was the lawsuits against Fortnite in 2018, where basically they took all of these various different dances from different Black performers and changed the names of all of the movements and then also erased the origin. Well, they changed the name of all of the dances, erasing the origins of those movements. And then they also didn't compensate or credit any of the people who made those movements. And so I began really thinking about what it means to not replicate that, and also to understand what it means to really understand that movement, especially Black movement, is something that's culturally owned and not necessarily just owned by one person. So what does it mean to sort of like think outside of the various different ways that we individualize movement? So and then digital blackface is seen in various other spaces, not just in motion capture in Fortnite, but also in like TikTok or Black memes that are seen on Twitter or on Facebook or social media. But also, there are other motion capture databases that are available to use. And in those databases, you may find some culturally specific movements, but those movements aren't necessarily described correctly. And some of those movements actually don't reflect the search terms of the movements. And then also, in the name of making it easy to use, the tools often omit valuable information from the users, including information about the motion capture actor who created the movements, and also historical and cultural information about the movements performed. So yeah, basically, I was pretty tired of looking at tools and technologies that sort of limit and flatten us in our culture and our histories to just the movements themselves and just basic descriptions. Our movements are very complex. They're very descriptive, and also I want to know who is actually doing the movements that are represented in my projects, and I want those people to have a space to tell their stories. And so I would say the common thread of those few examples that I just gave was this oversimplification of our people, our stories, and our lives. And it exists in a network of systems that commodify, quantify, and degrade our humanity in order to capitalize off of our existence and being. So how do we combat this commodification, exploitation, erasure, and dilution of Black culture and Black people? And what do cultural reparations and accountability look like? How can we discover, learn, invest in, and steward systems that prioritize liberation and abundance? And yeah, and also try to understand movement that doesn't only represent our individual experiences, but movement as it also represents our collective memory, which transcends space, time, and oppressive social structures. It allows us to connect to each other, our ancestors, our deepest selves, and gives us space to communicate to our future. To see movement itself as a technology, holding the stories of our existence across the diaspora. And so our bodies and our movements are more than data points and avatars. They hold our humanity. And so it's time for digital spaces and all spaces to reflect that. And so the Black Movement Project then transitioned into the Black Movement Library because I realized that a project was not big enough or large enough or expansive enough to hold the stories that I wanted to tell. And so it expanded into a library for activists, performers, and artists to create diverse extended reality projects, a space to research how and why we move, as well as an archive of Black existence. This library seeks to grow community through performances, extended reality experiences, workshops, conversations, and toolmaking. And I also just wanted to say, too, I began to focus more on the community-based work of this project, more so than just the data collection, mainly because I realized that a lot of the sort of the people who were mostly interested in using the tool that I wanted to build weren't necessarily the people that I wanted to necessarily use it. And so, yeah, so I started with a workshop called Understanding, Transforming, and Preserving Movement in Digital Spaces. And I'm just going to show a clip from an actual performance where it was combined with movement portraits that I created, as well as movement portraits from students that I worked with. Cool. And this was all projected on the Brooklyn Public Library. And I was just asking all of the students to create their own movement portraits, so to define their own movement journeys. But then I also created movement portraits of different Black creators, Black movers. Um, and essentially, through that
It's
process, I
another
did
way I can
interviews with
interact with
them.
music, and it's another way I can interact with people. Another way I can interact with myself.
And they're all wearing motion capture suits, so I'm live VJing their movements.
That's kind of where I am right now.
I guess I'll stop that one right there. Yeah, so that's like a 10-minute video. If y'all want to see that, like I can send that to you later. But just for time purposes, I just want to show you basically. I just want to talk a little bit about like what this is, and essentially what was born out of the library was this project called Movement Portraits, and essentially Movement Portraits serve as a way to learn about the performers contributing their movement to the Black Movement Library, and it's really asking this question: what happens when we ritualize the archival process of data collection and invite the community in as a witness. And so basically over the course of some months, I work with the performers, I learn their movement histories, and we record them, and essentially they perform to their interviews that are embedded into the soundscapes that are created. And then also with this version, we actually created these documentaries that we showed before each performer. And also all of the performers are wearing motion capture suits, and so I live archive them as they are performing, and then they also perform, and I live VJ all of their movements too. And essentially, I'm using the perception neuron suit, which is a type of motion capture suit, which is allowing me to basically stream their data and create those visuals in Unreal Engine. And so while movement portraits are a live performance, which is a touring live performance, I also do take the data afterwards and I create 2D and virtual reality representations of the movement portraits. And so basically, I want the movement to be re-represented as an abstract digital memory of the performance day. And also, when the library does like premiere with the movements, all of the movements will sort of live alongside of the portraits themselves. And so, with that said, I guess we can play a little bit more of this one, and then I can just go to the next one too. Yeah. And this was with 5 New York City-based performance artists.
And I think that I also had this wake-up call where I realized dance is not only about me, like it's literally driven by community. And so throughout the pandemic, I started linking people and projects started happening. I think that we all liberate one another. And I think that, it also starts internally. Like liberating yourself, knowing your worth.
You know, and that's my friends and my fat five, that's what that calls it. You know, people that are aggressive, that are undefeated. And so I think that we all know.
To the next video now. And so this is just an example of a 2D movement portrait of an into, which was also the first performer that I showed. Yeah.
R&B, hip hop, pop music, and experimental kind of the root of my art is very black music, black art. My whole family side. I was born in the United States. That all speaks. That's another thing. I think I was 10 years. My dad was more active in soccer. And then the winter came.
We can stop there. Yeah, but these are all 10-minute long movement portraits. So even the performances themselves last for about 10 minutes, to 10 minutes each. And yeah, the last part of this library that I've worked on so far is just having conversations. So basically, I've been working to bring together Black folks from different fields who actually work with Black movement to basically talk about all of these questions that I sort of went through in the beginning half of this. And so with the first conversation, I was able to talk to Amy Meredith Cox, Yale Associate Professor of Anthropology and African American Studies, and also writer and motion designer Yusuf Cole, who also wrote a really fantastic article about Fortnite and the appropriated dances, and who also writes a lot about video games in relationship to race and culture. And so I'm really interested in how I can sort of merge all of these different fields together to have more robust conversations about what it means to be seen and heard and celebrated. And so with that said, I'll just end with, the Black Movement Library to me is a movement, and it's a movement that celebrates Black history, Black culture. It's a movement that serves our community to learn and grow as society evolves. And it's a movement that holds us accountable in the ways we deal with Black people, our movements, our bodies, and our lives. Thank you.
If we have any questions, I'll ask people to come to this microphone if you could. Thank you.
Hey, LaJune, it's Catherine Emery. I'm a big fan of yours. I've been following your work for years, and I think you're amazing. I'm super sorry that I missed the event in Brooklyn. And are you planning any big public events anywhere in the States that we can follow?
Yeah, so I'm actually working on right now on another project called Antidote, which is premiering at Abrams Art Center December 11th, 12th, and the weekend of December 11th, 12th, and the 13th. And essentially, that's featuring all Black high school students, and we're pretty much doing like very similar work with them. So it's a live motion capture performance. Yeah. Mm. Abrams Art Center is on the Lower East Side in Manhattan.
Hey, LaJune. Thanks for being here. The question I have is around access to the library once you finish and publish. You mentioned that activists and other creators are kind of like the target for that fund. How do you think through the process of like who you let actually use this collection? And what kind of processes you're thinking there?
Yeah, so basically that's been the largest question that I've been sort of moving through now. I definitely believe that, and I know that this is probably going to be difficult to do, but the workshop that I put together to sort of have all of the sort of like learning the tools and softwares, like so it's the workshop itself is like half learning the tools and softwares, but then it's also talking about the tools and softwares. And so I think that access to the library sort of has to have that like first step of, okay, this is how you use this space. Mainly because also like motion capture is pretty difficult to use unless you know like Blender or like Motion Builder or like Maya or something. It's pretty difficult to really get your hands on it to apply it to a character. So to actually like get folks who normally wouldn't have access to those tools actually like access to sort of have their to work with it. That's pretty much my main focus. And I think that also for folks who know how to use those tools, I think that that's also sort of like the gateway to entry, no matter who you are. Which is cool. So basically the workshop too has been, it's a traveling workshop. So I've done it at various different organizations and institutions. So yeah, and it's been like growing and changing. Like it's been taught as just like sort of like a week-long thing, a 2-day thing, but then also as like a college course. So I've basically just been playing with different ways for folks to sort of enter the space. Yeah.
Hi, I'm always short. That was partially my question about access to the library, but also just the work is beautiful. I just wanted to know where I can access more of the pieces.
Yeah, sure. So my website is laja.me. Yeah. Thank you. But yeah, no, I'm definitely working through the accessibility portion. Mm. Cool. Thank you.